Welcome to the Half Yard Line. I'm Tim.
I am Luke.
And Luke, week 4 in the books. And, we find ourselves, Luke, at what used to be the quarter point, the quarter pole.
Yeah.
The first 25% of the season was done. The math was nice.
Clean.
The NFL has ruined this for us. It is now the 21.7% bar or something. I don't know. I haven't done the math. But
very much asking the wrong
bad
person to do back of the hand arithmetic in terms of percentage divisions. But yes, less than 25%. I'll go with that.
Not a fan of the 17 games only because it's an odd number. Should have gone to 20 if they were going to do it. Make the math real easy, but
18
isn't
me, too bad.
It is,
because you could do a third of the way and then a 2/3 of the way.
You could, but you couldn't really talk much after week 4. Anyhow, it is 23.5% for those who are interested. We're 23.5% of the way, 23.6, 5.2, 5.29. Anyhow, we're about 25% of the way through the season. We're about at the quarter pole. We're going to call it that, whether you like it or not. We're about to start bye weeks, right? Like this is kind of everyone's played 4 games. We now know exactly who everybody is. The quality of the teams are fixed at this point and will not change for the duration of the season. So we can predict your Super Bowl contenders right now.
Yep.
All done. And based on the first 25% of the season, Luke, how do you feel so far? Like about as expected, about crazy, about like last year, nothing like last year. What's your give me your summary?
I'll be honest, I kind of find this every year because we get to this stage of the season and I find myself thinking back. I was like, was it like this last year? I always find myself thinking that, and you know what? I can never actually remember because that's how football is. It wipes the brain clean as of about June. I feel like the previous season just dissolves into the ether of it was before now. But I certainly feel like this year has a level of unpredictability that is enjoyable. Whether or not it's unique, I can't tell you, but it's definitely enjoyable. Not many teams have done the early separating themselves from the pack, I don't think, which I think is a good thing. A lot of teams are deeply confusing, and I really have no idea if they're good or bad, or if they're going to be good or bad, my own team included. Teams putting in bafflingly poor performances, followed by bafflingly great performances, individual players putting in the same. So I think at this point, there's a couple of continuity teams who have stood out. Chiefs, San Francisco, and Philadelphia probably, I would say. And, Dallas has improved, certainly looked to have improved. But those 3, I think everyone said preseason, hey, these teams are really good. And those teams look to be at least pretty good, and they're all winning games. Outside of that, I think a bit of a morass of the middle class is quite big right now, as it should be. Lots of 2-2 teams that could go either way. But I think my overall feeling at the moment is it's very inconclusive, even by NFL standards, this early juncture. I don't know if you feel any differently than that.
Oh, it's always inconclusive at this early juncture. I mean, at this point last year, you could look at some teams and you thought you knew who they were. The Lions were 1-3, right? They were in the middle of that morass where they couldn't beat anybody, couldn't score. The Steelers were trash, and the Titans were starting to take off on what became a winning streak that was followed by a losing streak. What you thought you knew about. I mean, the Bears were 2-2. I mean, I read an interesting thing today that said, it was have you won a game since Elon Musk bought Twitter? And 31 of the teams all said, well, of course, that was October of 2022, followed by the one team that hasn't, and that's the Bears. So at that point, you thought, well, maybe they were putting something together. The Giants were 3-1 and charging. The entire NFC East was good.
Yeah, the Colts
both New York football
got a tie
teams
with the Chiefs, right? As well, I think that was in the first couple of weeks. It was like crazy results like that. Yeah, both New York teams. To your point,
we're both good, and we were talking about in the tri-state here about how football was back in New York. Well, what a difference 12 months makes.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say it's more back now than it was back then, if you know what I'm saying. Back to the normal
back to
service
normal, back
of
to
the last decade
exactly. Plus. That's right. So, but the NFL always surprises. I think we forget about the parity. We were starting to look at some blowout numbers in weeks 2 and 3 from different perspectives, either giving up the blowout or not, coming back and trying to make something of it. you're wondering maybe that parity's going away. I think teams like Arizona beating Dallas. I think teams they just have no business losing games, losing them, and teams have no business winning games, winning them is what makes the NFL very special. It's why the 32 teams can have fan bases even when they're perpetually terrible, because you feel like there.
Could be the year.
You and I both play golf, Luke, and I always think about the football season a little bit like your round of golf. I might go out and shoot a 110, but in my shooting a 110, I'm going to have 3 shots, 4 shots, and they are going to be so pure. And they're going to, I'm back, baby. If I could just do that every time, man, can you imagine? And it's like that as a football fan. The season's got 17 games, and for every week 4 as a Steeler fan, which was, almost unwatchable. You've got a week 2 where you come back and beat the Browns. You've got a week 3 where you look competent against the Raiders, and you think, well, hey, maybe we weren't so bad to begin with. 49ers are a really good team. We were 2-1. You feel pretty good about that. Then you get shellacked by a rookie quarterback. Your amazing defense gets 0 sacks for the first time, I think, in 60 years against a rookie quarterback that they put up 0 sacks. And you're going, well, okay, now I know nothing about I knew I had a sputtering offense, but we have this amazing defense. They're not tackling. They're not putting pressure on the quarterback. They're not stopping the run. What happened? And so you have just as many stunners as you do, upside wins. And so it gives you that. That's why we keep coming back for more. That's, I guess,
definitely
is what I would say.
I mean, I can tell you, we're not going to make this our team's chat podcast, but I can tell you from the Titans perspective, a couple quick anecdotes, and then we'll actually tell you what the hell we're going to talk about in this episode. But the Titans, 2-2, have beaten the Chargers and the Bengals, who everyone had in the playoffs, and have lost to the Browns in a humbling fashion, and the Saints, who no one knew if they'd be any good. So you tell me. I remember with no great fondness.
As expected.
Yeah. Do you remember when Ken Wisenhunt was the coach of the Titans? People out there who don't remember, this did happen. I think he was 2-0 in week 1 games, and in the rest of his tenure, he was like 2 in the
20.
Rest. It was like 2-21 or so. So yeah. Early season, reasons to be cheerful, reasons to be fearful abound. If you're a fan of a team that stinks, maybe you're not going to keep stinking. If you're a fan of a team that's good, just hold on for as long as you can and make sure you stay good. And on that note, we're going to touch on the 23.5% poll topics, as Tim mentioned at the top. Follow us on all the socials at Half Yard Line Pod. Email us halfyardlinepod@gmail.com. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, X/Twitter, whatever we're supposed to call it now, and all of that jazz. So please come find us, leave us a rating and a review on your podcast app of choice as well. Much appreciated. Like and subscribe and all the stuff. Today, 23.5% is done, and we're going to give you a look at a few different items, starting first of all with rookie quarterbacks of high renown and high draft status, and just have a quick check-in on how they're going. We're going to pop in to the DFI Swamps Downtrodden Franchise Index, see how our favorite terrible teams are getting on this season. Not so bad so far, but plenty of season left. And then finally, we're going to revisit our preseason predictions, which you can, of course, go back and listen to in our archive if you're so inclined and you want to do some real sense checking on us. But you can go back and find those.
Fact check.
And we are going to fact check ourselves today and basically try and rewrite some erroneous history, essentially. A couple of things to be proud of, a couple of things to be not so proud of. Cough, Bears, cough. We'll get there in a bit. As mentioned, Tim, we're going to start with the rookie QBs and not Aiden O'Connell, for those who are going to try and get on us about it. We're not talking about Aiden O'Connell, who started for the Raiders this weekend. You're talking about the top dudes, top 5 QBs from the draft that's just gone. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. Tim, I'll let you have first swing of the bat. You want to start at the top with B. Young, a guy you weren't super high on going into the draft, largely because he's an extremely small person by NFL standards. What have you made of his early returns in the NFL?
Well, last time I checked, he plays for a team that is 0-4.
Yes.
So not a great start if you are Mr. Young. I think you nailed it, right? Neither one of us particularly Bryce Young fans for a variety of reasons. I was very negative on him. I said he absolutely cannot go number 1 overall. This is a huge mistake by the franchise. I couldn't figure out. Everyone seemed to believe that was the consensus number 1 pick. He was the best guy in the pool. was not a position that we held. I felt like he was too small. I felt like he hadn't done enough in college. I felt like he played on a team where he had the best talent around him, and you just can't evaluate players in that way. And so, yeah, he's playing like I would expect him to play. Listen, you do not get drafted number 1 overall or in the first round or in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. You don't know how to play football. I'm confident this guy has all the throws, right? He has some decent feet. He can move. He's not I wouldn't call him super mobile. He's not Anthony Richardson, but he can move around. He can move the pocket. He can do all the things, but the NFL game moves faster. It's harder. He's playing on a bad team. He's never played on a bad team in his entire life. I think people don't realize that about these quarterbacks who come out. They have been the best player on the best team in their competition segment, whether it's school or Pop Warner or high school or college. They were the best kid on the best team because that's why they're in the NFL. And all of a sudden you're now on a bad team. And not that you don't have great athletes around you. Of course you do, but your athletes aren't better than everybody else's athletes. Your coaches aren't better than everybody else's coaches. You don't have a bigger budget than everybody else has. You don't travel on nicer buses than everybody else does. It's, you're on a bad organization. That's why you got picked number 1 overall. Right?
I remember when Kyler Murray went number 1 overall to Arizona a couple of years ago, and the stat did the rounds is like he hadn't lost a football game since he was in like junior high or something. Like he won every single game that he played as a high school quarterback. He was the best high school quarterback in the history of Texas high school football, which is saying something. National championship or state championship every year. Then he went to college. They won everything under the sun, and then he turns up to Arizona, and inside a month, he's probably lost more games than he has in his football playing career. Trevor Lawrence was very similar. Won everything all over the place. Was a 15-year-old starting quarterback in a high school, was already the bee's knees, the cat's pajamas, whatever your animal metaphor of choice would be in that situation. Do people still say that? Or maybe I'm just 85 years old.
I don't think so.
I think this Trevor Lawrence is the cat's pajamas, or whatever an old-timey person sounds like. But yeah, I think on the Bryce Young thing, I think you're right. I mean, we both had our doubts. I was higher on him than you were. I think he, like you say, he obviously has the talent, right? But the big question for him was all about the size, and those questions aren't going to go away until he makes them go away. He's already been injured and missed a game, which isn't great when you are coming in with questions about how you're going to hold up. And I do find watching him, when he gets hit, there is an intake of breath that I think you don't get with most other quarterbacks, just because the size differential between him and a defensive player, or especially a defensive lineman, is so large. I mean, in the game that they played at the weekend, their 4th loss, as you mentioned, he took a sack and he had he fumbled, and the fumble was returned for a touchdown. And to your point around his maybe not being the super mobile guy, it was definitely a welcome to the NFL play where he tries to kind of wiggle, get away from the backside pursuit. And, the guys at this level are going to catch you. The guys at the college level might not. And I've seen a couple of those from Bryce Young, which is just a learning experience, right? There are a few. Anthony Richardson is different because he's a star athlete by any measurement at any level, including like probably the Olympics, to be honest. But Bryce Young isn't. So you got to learn where your limits are. The thing that doesn't help, you mentioned he's on a crappy team. Their offense looks so slow. I mean, I don't know if you've watched.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, no,
if you watch like the end zone views, like the all 22 of them, it's like, how long are we waiting for guys to get open? I mean, they surround him with veteran pieces. It's not a young team. He's not got, Justin Fields has got DJ Moore from that trade, right? So you go, well, at least I've got a young piece, a quick piece to kind of give him some juice on the outside. He doesn't have that. Even a guy like Stroud's throwing to Nico Collins, who's looking really good, but he looks like he's got some pop and some burst and some moves to him. Thielen, DJ Chark, Hayden Hurst, Miles Sanders. This isn't really a very fast team. And Bryce Young is kind of hanging around and trying to learn how to throw with greater anticipation than he ever has, greater touch than he ever has, against better players than he's ever played against. So it's tough. So far, if you believe in these things, he's the 33rd ranked PFF quarterback out of 34. The only person he's ahead of is Desmond Ridder, who has looked not very good and also doesn't really get asked to do much because Arthur Smith hates throwing the ball. So I think certainly too early to make any broad brush statements about how Bryce Young's career will go, but I think the concerns coming in have been borne out in the early going is probably how I'd summarize him.
Can I blow your mind?
You may.
I thought there was one stat that I thought was particularly damning of Bryce Young, and that is his completed air yards per completion. So not per attempt, per completion. Every time the ball is caught, on average, how far did that ball fly in the air?
Probably
what would you suppose his completed? Just hazard a guess.
I'm going to go 6.
Yeah, 2.9.
Oh, man. Oh, I mean, they are on a lot of short stuff. I'll tell you that. But
at 2.9, what you're saying right at that point is, no, at 2.9, what you're saying there is, I don't trust my quarterback to stand in the pocket long enough for a play to open up. My defense or my offense can't get guys open fast enough to move anything down field. And as a quarterback, I don't have the confidence to make those throws. So, he is clearly, listen, he was a 65% completion percentage quarterback in college. He's throwing at about 65% completion in the NFL. So in some ways, doing the same things he was doing, but those completions are not buying you much in the way of moving the ball down the field. So much more to come.
Yeah, just kind of to what I was saying, just to wrap it up. I mean, again, I think that the lack of team speed doesn't help that, right? You don't have guys who can burn off defenses deep, who can give you that deep route production. Adam Thielen at this stage isn't running a 4-4. Like, he might be running a 4-8. So we're going to send him on a go? Probably not. So I agree with you, and that is a pretty damning stat. I think there's a few things that do go into that, but certainly one to keep an eye on. Let's move off Bryce Young, Tim, to the guy I think both of us said was the best guy in this class. Of course, I'm talking about Coleridge Bernard Stroud IV, better known as CJ.
That's CJ. Yeah,
I'm going to avoid calling him that as often as I can because Coleridge Bernard Stroud.
What's the J?
No, it's just, I guess it's Junior. Right?
Oh, Coleridge Junior probably. Bernard is the middle name. I got you.
Coleridge Bernard, as I would say, or Bernard if you're American. Coleridge Bernard Stroud IV. Tim, the fourth.
So Junior.
I don't think anyone would debate that of the guys who have started their careers this year, the quarterback class, this guy's looked like the best. We both said before the draft we thought he was the best guy going. I wanted the Titans to move heaven and earth to draft him, and we didn't in the end. To be honest, it wasn't that feasible of a possibility anyway, but we'll put that to one side. Thing that's really impressive about Stroud, and you can touch on it a bit more because you just watched him beat your Steelers.
Stop it.
Is he just plays with such a veteran's like tempo. He doesn't seem rushed. Like, the Houston Texans are not a team flush with talent right now. We talked about Bryce Young not having that much talent around him. I mean, CJ Stroud's got, Dameon Pierce has been okay, and he's not started his season very well. Tunsil wasn't playing at the weekend. Nico Collins is the number one receiver. No one's idea of a bona fide, dyed-in-the-wool number one alpha dog wideout. Robert Woods is fine. It's not, and Dalton Schultz is fine, so it's not exactly murderer's row. But he just doesn't ever seem to be rushed. He gets in the pocket. His pocket movement is excellent. He goes through the reads. He keeps a wide base. He stays ready to throw. And we said before the draft, the way he throws the ball is extremely aesthetically pleasing to watch. I can't really describe why. It just is.
Looks like a quarterback, man.
It looks easy. It looks like an animation of the ideal throw. Whether it is mechanically or not, I can't tell you. But there was one throw in particular in the Steelers game that I wanted to highlight, just because it was not that, like, when when guys are protected and they're on platform and they're able to look around, a lot of guys look good. There was one in particular where this was kind of more of an improvisational throw, where he kind of threw a back foot pass out of a guy trying to tackle him after a play action out of the shotgun up the seam. And I was like, where do you even get the balls to throw that? Like, the guy's not even turned, no one's turned around. He just throws it to an area off the back foot, just complete instinct, sidearms it. And I was like, that was a wow play. I think, it's probably a 12-yard throw in, on the box score. It doesn't look like much, but that flashed some more like improv skills than maybe I thought he would have early in his career, because a lot of rookie QBs struggle with some of that stuff. Been super impressed with CJ. I'm assuming you will echo that from firsthand and painful experience.
I hate you for making me talk about this, but I did predict this, so I will take credit for it. I did not think he could play the Pittsburgh Steelers and take 0 sacks. I do think that's notable here. He's been blitzed 39 times. He's been hurried 18 times, hit 17 times, a total of 46 quarterback pressures, which is when there's a defensive lineman in your face before. Well, not in your face.
They
made you move off the spot or in the area when you threw, basically behind the offensive line, where the record keeper determines that the defense made you throw the ball before you wanted to.
Impacted the play.
Yeah, 27% of the time. So 75% of the time, he gets to sit back there clean. So there's something to be said for that. I have not done enough analytics to tell you that Houston's offensive line is great or even good. They've got some good players on it. There's some names there, spend a lot of money and assets to collect some of them. But that's pretty good for a rookie back there to have time to think. However, he is not sitting back there and just waiting. His time between snap and throw, 2.3 seconds on average.
Wow.
So he is getting the ball out as well as some other quarterbacks. Most people who have a sub 2.5 second pocket time are guys who are throwing, dink and dunk and dink and dunk and dink and dunk and dink and dunk. We talked about Bryce Young with his 2 yards, air yards per completion. CJ Stroud does not have 20, and you wouldn't expect him to. 20 would be crazy, but he has 7. Those 7 yards in the air per completed pass. He's moving the ball in the intermediate spaces. He's got some gorgeous deep balls. And not only have they been pretty, they've been thrown to the proper side at the proper height. You're hitting guys with their arms outstretched in stride. You're hitting them, on the sideline, back shoulder. You're hitting, he threw a ball against the Steelers that, it was just exactly the right place. Now, why should he have the time to get that ball out of there is a different conversation. But he did a really good job. He's got 1,200 yards. I think Bryce Young has 500 yards. So you're talking about meaningful impact on the game. 151 passing attempts in the first 4 games of his career. He's throwing the ball. you're pushing 40 passing attempts per game.
He's not hiding behind a run game. He's not hiding behind
that's what I mean.
A stellar defense. It's very much your team already.
He's out there doing what he's supposed to do. And so there's a series of statistics, and I don't mean to make this all about stats, but there's a series of statistics called adjusted passing stats. And basically they benchmark what you did against what the average quarterback would do in the same positions. And so 100 is average for every one of these statistical categories.
It's like a baseball statistic, right? Where they make it all linear to 100. If you're over 100, you're above average. If you're below 100, you're below average.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to even name what they are. I'm just going to read across the rankings for CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young. So Bryce Young, adjusted passing numbers, 61, 61, 69, 68, 102, 77, 104, 85, 80. The bad ones for CJ Stroud, for Bryce Young are doing the normal things: completion, net yards, average yards, air yards, adjusted net yards. The good ones were completion percentage and interceptions, right? He's not throwing the ball to the wrong team. He's not throwing a ton of incompletions. He's been relatively accurate, and that's because they're not asking him to move the ball more than 2 feet.
Yeah.
All right, so take that same set of criteria for CJ Stroud. Now remember, he's a rookie. 100 is average. 118, 113, 126, 120, 92, 99, 130, 100, 116.
Wow.
And so the worst one for him was 92, and that was completion percentage. The best one for him, again, was his interception rate, 130 per, on a scale of, where 100 is average. Looking good on adjusted net yards, air yards, catch rate, on target percentage. All the things.
Yeah.
He looks like a very above average quarterback in the first 4 games of his career playing for a team that was trash a year ago.
Yep.
I guess we could talk about CJ Stroud all day long. He is, I thought, the best quarterback in the draft. He has certainly played the best of the quarterbacks playing the quarterback position like quarterbacks traditionally play it. I got a lot of love for CJ Stroud. He made my Steelers look absolutely silly this weekend, and I think he's going to be a good quarterback for a long time. But that's basically doubling down on my offseason prediction.
Yeah, exactly. I think we both liked him coming in, and certainly done nothing to dispel us of that notion in the early going. Let's touch on Anthony Richardson before we move off to QBs.
Yes, sir.
Certainly coming in with the most, I guess I will call it, it's not a statistic, but I'm going to make it up, expected volatility, I think is probably how I would define Anthony Richardson.
That probably is a stat.
The first play on Sunday against the Rams, he ran and then he slid, and there was an audible cheer in the stadium that he slid. So I think hopefully a lesson learned there. Unfortunately, has already suffered the concussion.
Let's say missing games for concussions is not where you want to start week 4.
Yeah, when you're a guy who's going to have running as a big part of his game, don't take that many hits. I mean, that's not rocket science, right? But it's a lesson learned, hopefully, and we wish him a long and healthy career, except against the Titans twice a year. You can't take away that part of his skill set. You've seen some of the highlights of his. I mean, he's just such a ridiculously athletic human being. The size, the strength, the speed, the agility, the movement skills. We saw all the combine stats. It's born out at this level. We touched on it already.
So freaking exciting. Yeah.
He's a scary athlete. Like, he is a rare guy. I mean, I've got the Derrick Henry jersey behind me. He's basically the same size as him. And some of the stuff he does, you think, how are you even more of an athlete than this guy? It's kind of crazy. The cool thing with Richardson, I think, that I've noticed, and it's true of all running quarterbacks, but I think it's worth bearing in mind. People obviously hone in on the long touchdown runs or the trucks or the crazy hurdles like Josh Allen hurdles. The key thing with him, which has certainly happened against the Rams, so many hidden yards you get out of having a guy that's this good of an athlete. When he runs out the pocket, whether he's under duress, whether it's a design, you just get extra yards every single time. So you might get 3 yards if you've got an average athlete QB. He'll get you 8. He'll get you 7. Those add up over time. I mean, you don't want to have him be running 20 times a game by any stretch of the imagination, I don't think, because it's just, almost malpractice in terms of the investment you put in the kid. But every time he gives you that little edge, and it's a little edge, and it's a little edge, and it keeps you in the game, and it gets you a first down, and those things are really important for quarterbacks. A lot of the time it's through the air, but if they can do it on the ground like he can, that's a huge benefit. I mean, they were down 23-0 in this game, and they managed to take it to overtime, which is a bit crazy. If you want to watch tape of just what I refer to as arm porn, watch this game. There was the throws in this game from both quarterbacks were absolutely insane. Yeah. Richardson threw a couple in this game, which I was just like, wow, like that's like not many can make that type pass. There's one up the seam. There was a crosser to Mo Ali Cox, which was for a touchdown, which he threw like 30 yards on a rope. He's basically falling over. He flips the 2-pointer to Zach Moss after breaking out of a sack from Aaron Donald. Like, there's just stuff he can do that other guys can't do. And he's shown some of that. He's shown a little bit of recklessness in terms of the running, the taking hits. He had a play in this game where he was sacked by Aaron Donald and he fumbled, but it got overturned by a flag. So, you want to keep those to a minimum. But I will quickly say Shane Steichen, I think, done a good job, obviously coming over from Philadelphia, designing plays for him. Has comfort with a mobile QB in Jalen Hurts.
Sure.
The Colts scored 2 touchdowns from the identical play, but one was a run and one was a pass, which I just thought was really cool. They lined up, they ran a kind of short motion in. One of them was a QB power, and the other one, he just popped the pass to the tight end. I was like, that's helping your QB get better. We spoke about it when we spoke about the Steelers last week. Put your young quarterback in a position to be successful. It's very hard to evaluate them.
You mean putting him in shotgun on 4.5 yard inside field goal range, trailing by 10 points?
Yes, exactly like that.
That's how I'd say getting him hurt.
Yeah, Richardson has been a little bit volatile, a little bit reckless, but I think overall he's further along and he's been more complete of a QB, I would say, at this stage in his career than maybe I expected. I thought he'd be a little bit more rock'em sock'em than he's been, but he's impressed me with how mature his play has been, especially for a guy who only started, I think, 13 college games.
Well, he started 13 college games, 12 of them his second year. Well, I mean, his third year, but he redshirt freshman. So he played in a couple other games the year before, but his completion percentage in college was 50.
Yeah, it was not good.
50. And that's why I was low on him. I believe the number one most predictive stat and how well a college quarterback's going to play is his accuracy. Can he put the ball where he's trying to put it? So drop adjusted accuracy if you can get really good stats, because obviously when in college you're throwing to guys who may not be NFL players. Yeah. And so drop adjusted accuracy is huge, and he did not have it. Florida has good receivers. It wasn't like they were just dropping the ball over the yard. He was electric in the rushing game. I mean, he had 103 rushing attempts his sophomore, his final year, the year he started all 12 games, for 650 yards, 9 touchdowns. The guy was a legitimate threat in the running game, and that's ultimately
an 80-yard touchdown against LSU, I think, right? Which was absolutely
and it was
bananas.
Unbelievable. He also threw for 327 times for 2,600 yards and 17 touchdowns that way. But I'm like you. I thought he was going to come in, kind of be Lamar Jackson. And listen, nothing wrong with being Lamar Jackson. But I didn't think he would be as good as Lamar Jackson. So if you and I went to the Ravens-Titans playoff game in Baltimore.
Moons ago.
Yeah, and I remember watching, and, while the Titans won that game, and that was great, watching Lamar when he got out of the pocket, watching when you broke contain, and you could just see it coming. And you're like, he can't pop. No way. Wow. He was just that kind of a player. And you see that with Anthony Richardson. You go, is he going to, oh my, wow.
Yeah.
And I expected to see that in the running game. I expected to see amazing athletic plays. I think when I gave my preseason preview on the quarterbacks, I said, if you're going to draft him in fantasy, go for it. He's probably going to score a lot of fantasy points. I don't know that he's going to make that team very good. And maybe that's a fair approximation. They're 2-2, better than I thought they'd be, but they're not setting the world on fire. He is scoring a bunch of fantasy points. He has missed a game, and so that's impactful, obviously. But to break some of the throws he's throwing, to be as poised in the pocket, to be as accurate as he's been, and he's not the most accurate quarterback in the NFL, but to increase your accuracy, from college to the pros is pretty good. His on-target rate right now, his actual completion percentage isn't great, though his wide receivers aren't either. But his on-target percentage, is 73%. So 73% of the time he's putting the ball where it needs to be to get caught. Now they're only catching it 55% of the time, which is,
I think it is,
yeah, but he's only got a 20% bad throw percentage. He got a 10% drop rate, which is sort of insane.
That's high.
Yeah, it's very, very high. And so I think I have been very impressed with Richardson. So if I were to rank the three who kind of, no offense to Will Levis, but the top three in the draft, CJ Stroud clearly, in my opinion, the top guy. Anthony Richardson clearly number 2 and substantively better than I would have expected. I did have Will Levis ranked above him when we did our. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. When you'll be proven right, Tim. You'll be proven right. We just need to wait on that one.
When he wins the MVP.
Yes.
And then that would be great for you. And then obviously Bryce Young, too early to tell. We're not burying the kid yet. I'm sure he's got a lot of talent. Hasn't had an opportunity to show it yet, given the opportunities he's been placed in Carolina. We knew that team was going to be questionable. Hopefully they can take the assets they're going to get this offseason and continue to improve, put some better linemen in front of him, get him some skill position players, and see what they can make out of that offense. But for right now, I've got him in a distant third based on performance through 4 whole games.
Yeah, exactly. So I would definitely agree with that. Not much more to add, and we'll look forward to touching back on the rookies as the season goes on. Another thing we love to touch on as we go is the Downtrodden Franchise Index through
love the DFI.
23.5% of the season, as we mentioned. The DFI, Tim, on the whole, which for those who don't remember, as we sometimes don't, is currently the Colts, Jags, Cardinals, Browns, Jets, Lions, Commanders, Falcons, Panthers, Texans. Collectively, their record, Tim, through 4 weeks,
17-23 for a 42.5% winning percentage.
That is pretty good. Now, there are a couple teams in there that, if you haven't listened to the DFI pod from before the season, go back and do so. We'll give our extremely unmathematical, completely subjective rationale behind why we chose these teams, although some should be obvious. The Jets have gone through a downtrodden feat of brilliance in losing the all-star QB that was going to save them after 4 snaps. The Lions are winning the division, but I think they were kind of a hype team coming in. I was certainly high on the Lions coming in. The Colts, we mentioned with Richardson, look better than you would think, 2-2, which is good. The Cardinals, I thought, had a legit shot to not win a single game, and I think you financially may have had some interest in that happening, but they've been impressive, I would say, given the lack of talent. And we spoke about the Panthers obviously already as well. Of the teams, Tim, in the DFI, any you want to kind of touch on, just to give credit, give blame, give hope, give despair out to any of these franchise fans?
Well, listen, I think it's important to note that this same group of teams last year through the same part of the season were 14-24. So, and then a couple of ties, believe it or not.
Yes, there were quite a few ties early last season.
14, 24, and 2 to be precise. 37% win percentage. So we're up 7%, 6.5% year over year. That's positive. You look at the teams who've improved, right? The Texans were 0-3-1 last year, sitting at 2-2 right now. You're looking at the Lions were 1-3. They're sitting at 3-1, right? Those are your big advancers. You look at teams that are maybe sliding back a little bit. The Jets were 2-2, maybe riding way up. Certainly, they're bringing the quarterback. You expect them to take off. I didn't. I had them. I just want everybody to remember I had them winning 4 games. Talk about that.
You did not predict the Aaron Rodgers to get injured, but yes.
Yeah. Well, you never. I mean, listen. I predicted him to win 4 games, so sure. I guarantee you that's closer than everybody else is going to get. And that's really it, right? What's interesting to me is we don't have a lot of teams in the DFI this year who are worse than they were last year. And 36% winning percentage isn't good last year, but it's not 0-0, whatever either. So more power to the DFI. I think we're moving in the right direction. 30 games into the season for the group. They have played each other a little bit. Maybe that helps. That's a guaranteed 500, when you toss it in the pile, right? One team's going to win, one team's going to lose. But it's been good for the DFI. I think we got really excited about the Lions last season. We talk about them being a hype team, but that's happened before. They were a hype team last year. They were a hype team. And to see it come off for that team, you and I have talked about one of these pods. We're going to do how did the Lions build what they've built? And they got to keep winning for that to make any sense. But
yeah,
what they've been trying to do as an organization for the last 4 or 5 years, do it the right way, build it the right way, bring in the right people, has been really laudable. I'm really happy for Matt Stafford and Jared Goff, how that trade worked out for both of them. At the end of the day, I think both guys won in that deal.
Definitely. Both franchises probably won too, right? Rams won the Super Bowl, and the Lions look very, very good, and they had a lot of assets to play with, and they seem to have deployed them well.
Yeah, got a quarterback that's been certainly the best quarterback they've had since, the one they traded.
Before that, I thought you were going to be like Rodney Peete or something.
Well, you could go if you want to talk about before Stafford, right? You could go back forever. But Goff has been good for them. He's been accurate for them. He's been exactly what they needed him to be, and they got a couple of first-round picks out of the deal. You want to hit on LA, but they won the Super Bowl. Like, that's one of those things that just worked out great for everybody. It was a wonderful fit. I crapped all over it at the time. I was like, how does this make any sense? You either believe in this guy or you don't believe in him. If you don't believe in him, why in the world are you trading for him? If you do believe in him, why are you letting him go? Like, the whole thing didn't make any sense to me. But it's absolutely worked out brilliantly for both teams. So love what you see there in the Lions. The Texans, it's a team, the whole Deshaun Watson thing, like, lighted on fire. Bill O'Brien tore the building apart. And let
problems in the front office, arguments with who's the GM, who's not the GM, why is this
the owners got spies in the locker. I mean, like, the whole thing was just
toxic, right? Terrible.
Yeah, to see them pulling it back together at my team's expense, unfortunately. But you can get behind, and that's the nice part about the DFI, right? I don't have any strongly negative feelings about any of these teams, save for the Browns, right? And that's because I'm a Steeler fan. You can root for these guys. The Commanders are 2-2 and looked all for the world like they might get to 3-1 against a really good football team this weekend. You can get behind that. You can get excited about that, and that's the best part about the DFI. So far, so good. We need to have a DFI next year, so some of you guys keep losing, please. We'll figure out who's
some teams who are on the road, but
that was the question. I did want to ask you: do you have one?
You wanted to ask me?
I wanted to ask you: do you have one team? And there are a couple easy ones. I mean, the Broncos are mine. You can have them if you want, but teams that are headed for the DFI who aren't yet on it based on their quarter pole performance.
Yeah, there was one team I had on the watch list before the season started that we said couldn't be in because they made the playoffs, I think, twice in the last 5 years. That is Chicago, and they're 0-4. Now, I will say that they were 0-3, and at 0-3, I would have said this is a dead cert. Justin Fields looked bad. The offense was completely discombobulated. They couldn't score any points. It was depressing. And then they kind of, they still lost, but they pulled it together, and the offensive output certainly at the weekend was impressive. We're actually going to touch on Chicago in a bit, so I won't get too much into them as we look at our preseason predictions and how accurate those were. But I would say they're my team to circle right now as, potential entrants come year end. I mean, if you go through this entire Eberflus, maybe even Fields era and come out the other side with nothing to show for it, then that's a problem. Now, the good news for them, they have a lot of picks. They have a lot of picks. Currently, they have the top 2 picks in next year's draft, which would be hilarious if it comes to fruition. I don't think that's happened since the Browns, who took Tim Couch and Courtney Brown in the late 90s, because, that's
Whoops.
the Browns for you. Have had the top two, but,
they had 1 and 3 as well, right? Didn't they have 1 and 3 in the 2000s?
I think they have. Yeah, they've had 1 and a lot of picks. They've had 3 picks in the first round, I think 3 times, and they each one, you look at them and you're like, you drafted who? Why?
Yeah.
So that's the Browns for you. I would say if there's one team I can circle, you mentioned teams you don't want to see do well. I definitely don't want to see the Colts do well, because I still have a lot of bitterness about the Andrew Luck years. But I cannot, in all good conscience, hope for anything good for the Browns, just because of the whole situation there. But they are
Deshaun
pretty
Watson
hamstrung.
deal,
The whole way that was handled, we won't get into it here, but
Yep.
it left a bit of a sour taste, to say the least. So the Browns, if that deal doesn't work out, they're in big old trouble. So one to keep an eye on through for the rest of the season on the DFI. But Tim, I teased it. Let's get into some self-flagellation right now. Keep using old-timey words today. I don't know why. Anyway,
you do. All right, so before we get into specific ones, Luke, I want to run down our playoff teams.
Yes.
All right. So in the AFC, just give me your reaction. I'm going to go one by one. You still like it, or what was I thinking? So number one, you had
these are my predictions, right?
These are your predictions. How do you feel about
predictions? Okay, good.
Bills,
good.
Dolphins,
good.
Bengals,
bad. It's a nuanced responses, aren't they?
They are
excellent. I feel very good about the
Chiefs. Steelers.
Oh, not good in any way.
No.
No.
It's so bad.
No.
Chargers.
The Chargers are just chargering in both directions. So maybe they'll figure it out. But I'm not feeling great about the Chargers.
The Chargers will either make the postseason by 1 game, or they'll miss it by 1 game, because that's what they do.
Someone will make a kick in their game or in someone else's game on the last snap of the season
to eliminate them.
Yes, or put them in. We just don't know.
Yeah. And then your last team, you had your Titans winning the division in the AFC South. How do you feel about that now? I mean, last week, before this game, you were ready to commit suicide. Like, you were done with football.
Yes. Awful.
Yeah.
I feel okay. I will say I feel okay. I'm glad that I was so far proven right that the Jags were overhyped and overrated, and that's been true so far. Beaten 2 not very good teams and lost the other 2 games. Titans have beaten the 2 good teams they played, and they lost the other 2. So you tell me. I don't know. But I feel okay about those. So not too bad, I would say. On the whole,
on my side,
not terrible.
Yeah, on my side, the AFC, I had the Patriots winning their division.
Yeah, it's good.
So
they must be riding high in the Bill Belichick, fresh off his worst ever loss as a head coach. Bailey Zappi's out there again.
I've missed a lot of picks in my day. That one is on up there.
That could be a humdinger.
That's a humdinger faux show. I had the Bengals winning the AFC North. Somebody has to win the AFC North, frankly.
I had them winning it too. The Burrow injury has just taken so much air out of the balloon there. It just seems like almost irrecoverable even at this early stage, but we'll see.
I mean, it does, but at the same time, if you think about where we are in the season, where we are in the standings, if you were going to go out there
last year,
you're going to go lay money right now. The Bengals are 1-3. The Ravens are 3-1. The Ravens have finished the last 3 seasons in the wrong direction. The Bengals have a history of starting slow. I mean, certainly a negative 45-point differential does not make me feel good about that pick.
Scored 3 points against the Titans.
I would love it if my Steelers were the team that looked to win the division, but the Steelers have a minus 38-point differential, even though we're 500. So take that for what you will. I had the Jags to win their division and the Chiefs to win their division. You know, the AFC South is very much up for grabs. The Colts look better than we expected. The Jags
everyone's 2-2.
About like you and I expected. My fear was we went and did the point differential thing, and I was worried about the Titans maybe being worse than I thought they were last year. They obviously finished the season on a 7-game losing streak, but was that really, with the real Slim Shady, please stand up, right? Which of these teams was the real team? Right. And the way they ended it up, I ended a little more negatively. I think when I told you in the preseason pod, I wholly planned to pick them, and then I went and looked at the math again, and I went, ooh. So, but that's, you know, I don't hate that pick. It's sort of a 50-50.
Sure. Yeah,
I do have the Titans. I do have the Titans just missing the playoffs.
Which, to be honest, whoever finishes second in the AFC South is very likely not to make it, I would suggest. So you got to pick one.
No, I think that's right. And then I've got the Steelers. So, whoops. And the Bills, though not winning their division because the Patriots are going to. And I have completely omitted the Dolphins from the playoff field because, Tua was going to take a step back and score 70 points in one game.
Yeah, I had the Dolphins winning the AFC East, which I felt a lot better about before this weekend, but they've still looked pretty good, looking about as explosive as anyone in the entire NFL.
If you're gonna split with a team, you want to lose the first one, right? Because the second one's coming in the postseason, so you never know.
Well, third one, but yeah.
Well, I forget they're in the same division, but yes. So that's the AFC. I certainly the Patriots picks terrible. The Bengals picks meh.
Yeah, it's not too.
Leaving the Dolphins out's dumb.
Yeah, it's probably slightly more favorable for me than for you, but only by maybe a team. I would say maybe
I went contrarian on a couple of places that did not pan out for me. Yeah. We're going to see that a lot in the NFC. NFC for you: Philly, Saints, Lions, Niners, Dallas, Seattle, Chicago. Any of those you want to throw out?
No, I think they're all definitely going to make the postseason.
Yeah, I think
nothing more to add. 0-4 Chicago.
We'll talk about Chicago later. But the rest of these, the Saints, Saints,
I don't know. The NFC South is kind of all over the place. Tampa is a mea culpa. I thought Tampa was going to be shocking this year. They've looked really good. They've only lost one game. The game they lost was against Philadelphia, and they could have won that game. It wasn't a blowout by any stretch. Okay, listen, was it that close? If you forget the score almost, no, Philadelphia was the better team. But Tampa's not looked bad at all. Baker's playing well. Evans is doing his Evans thing. They can't run the ball worth a lick still, even despite the fact they're actually trying this year. Defense is good, stepped up. They lost a couple guys, doesn't seem to affect them too much. So, yeah, Tampa is a mea culpa in the NFC South. But, again, much like the AFC South, I would strongly suggest whoever is second in that division is not going to make the playoffs. So I'm going to say that's a one-team. I said it's a one-team division in the preseason. If I get the one team wrong, I'm going to look like an idiot, but we'll see. If Derek Carr's hurt, I'm pretty fucked, I would suggest.
That's the one, dear listener, if you do remember that Luke and I picked exactly the same, the NFC South, even though Luke spent an awful lot of time researching it and I had my children pick randomly out of a hat.
Yeah.
So.
Both wrong.
Yeah. I had the Saints, the Commanders, the Vikings, the Niners, the Giants, the Saints, and the Bears. Feeling good about most of that. Vikings... I have got to tell you, I know I'm aware of their record. They are 1-3. I think they are better than their record indicates.
I know last year Carolina, who are not good.
Stop it. And so I understand that they did beat Carolina's 0-4. But they,
one score game.
But they won.
They won.
Last year they were beating teams. They were not as good as on crazy things at the end. I think if you look at the way their first 3 games ended, they had a chance to win all of them, probably should have won 2 of them.
Yeah.
And they did things, at the end of the day, I believe my quote was, everything I know about football says Minnesota's not going to be as good, but I'm picking them anyway. Turns out what I know about football was better than my gut instinct, but I'm not giving up on the Vikings yet. I am not giving up on the Vikings yet. So we'll throw that out there. Obviously, big miss for both of us there. Chicago. One other one before we get into Chicago that I want to.
I have one as well that I'd like to get into. So you go first.
All right, I got 2 things here real quick, and maybe their second one's the same. So, but number one, I did pick the Giants to make the postseason. I have to say, I did not pick them to win their division, which
I didn't want to bring that one up, but you did it. So good for you.
I had Commanders, Giants, Eagles, Cowboys in that order.
Yeah,
that might be the single worst division picking ever done by. Now, Washington has looked okay.
Washington's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, they're not going to win their division.
No.
And Philadelphia and Dallas are both going to make the postseason, even though I have neither of them in the postseason. So that's a big whiff for me. But one team that neither of us have in the postseason that may not make the postseason, but has certainly performed better than I think either of us gave them credit for, was the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, exactly.
Any thoughts on Puka Nacua and company?
Yeah, no, it's exactly right, Tim. That's, meeting of the minds is exactly who I wanted to bring up. I mean, I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Richardson watching the Rams-Colts game, which the Rams obviously ended up winning, and I mentioned the crazy throws. Matt Stafford, questions about him coming off the injury, taking a lot of hits, not as young as he was, etc. At times this season has played as well as I've ever seen him play in his entire career. If you told me before the season began that Cam Akers would start one game, look terrible, and then they bench him and trade him. Cooper Kupp would go on IR before the season started and would be yet to play through 4 games. I would say there was a 0% chance that this team will be any good at all. Now, I was very much wrong. I thought this was a team that could be, a bottom feeder in the NFC, would struggle to win 5-6 games. They look really good. The offenses look brilliant. I mean, this is like a bit of a McVay renaissance, right? People talk about the McConaughey, the McConaissance, right? Maybe this is the McVay-naissance. We'll work on it. That works better. McVay-naissance. Anyway. But I was just curious because I was watching this game and you mentioned Puka Nacua. He's been, the cause célèbre of most of the NFL media this season. If it wasn't for Brock Purdy, he'd be the most discussed late round player in the NFL so far this year. Right? But Puka Nacua, 5th round pick, has just been putting up like astronomical, like Calvin Johnson numbers, which is absurd. 5th round rookie out of BYU. And I
think you said in week 1, crazy that Puka Nacua has turned into Jerry Rice. In week 4, you're going, maybe
he's better than Jerry Rice. Jeez. But no, what's interesting with the Rams, and this was true when they won the Super Bowl prior, but I mean, we weren't doing the podcast then, so we can get into it now. I'm just interested in the team construction of this is so unusual. The fuck them picks. I can say that. This is an explicit podcast. I already swore once. So F them picks for those who want the sanitized version. That requires you to scout so well in the mid to late rounds. You have to nail it. You have so little margin for error. We spoke in the preseason previews about how the Rams cap space not being very good because it's all going on like 3 guys. Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford.
We were burying them, man.
They got rid of Leonard Floyd. They got rid of Bobby Wagner. They spent Whitworth's no longer with the team's retired. So like you've had these guys come off the books, but you still got dead cap allocated to them. You still got money going to 3 guys, and the rest of the roster's a bunch of young randos no one's ever heard of. Here are the players who touched the ball on offense by round in this game on Sunday, right? Which, again, they won this game. So forget Matt Stafford. He's a first-round pick. He was first overall selection.
Of course.
Not by them, but by somebody else.
Yep.
Here's the rounds. 5th round, 4th round, 2nd round, 4th round, 5th round, undrafted free agent. They're the offensive players who touched the ball.
All-stars.
So you've got 2 second-round players, which is Van Jefferson, who is now wide receiver like 3 or 4.
3. Yeah, maybe.
He's wide receiver 3. Preseason, everyone said he'd be great. I certainly took him in fantasy leagues thinking he'd be great. That hasn't panned out. Nakua's a 5th.
You took Puka Nacua, right?
Yeah,
in many fantasy leagues.
I got him on waivers in one league, which was very pleasing. But Tutu Atwell was the other second-round pick, who was a guy coming out of Louisville who was touted as like, is this going to work? Because he's tiny. And Matt Stafford's throwing him the ball. He's looking great. Kyren Williams, 5th-round running back, looked great coming from Notre Dame. Again, was a shorter guy. Is he going to be able to cope with a workload? Is he going to be supported? He's looked very good. The top 5 tacklers, I went further than him, the top 5 tacklers for this team on Sunday. 3rd round, undrafted free agent. 4th round, 7th round, undrafted free agent. The most crazy, here's the crazy stat.
Hang on, in fairness, they can't have any higher draft picks because they don't have any
they traded them all away.
To take.
True.
But the point is the team is doing that and playing well
and winning. And here's the thing that I wanted to really touch on. I gave you all the rounds,
yeah, of course,
all the numbers. Every single player that I just mentioned, right? In the rounds, the players that are associated with that round, they've all only ever played for the Rams.
Yep, drafted by and kept. Yep.
So they're drafted by and kept. The only one who's an exception is Christian Roseboom, who is a linebacker who is an undrafted free agent, who they signed first, then they released him, went somewhere else, the Chiefs, I think, then he came back. So the Rams are basically drafting their entire roster, except for about...
in the late rounds.
Well, and 2 of the other guys, Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp, who they drafted too. So I just thought I wanted to touch on the Rams. First of all, to say, my apologies, Rams house, all 3 Rams fans in LA can get on me on Instagram and Twitter or whatever else at Half Yard Line Pod. But you just drafted your entire roster, basically. Everyone who's having an impact an impact on this team was drafted by the Rams. And I just think that is so worthy of praise. Les Snead got a lot of crap last year after the the Super Bowl win, then they went in the tank, all the injuries. They've looked more than competitive in the NFC West, which is a tough division. It's going to be tough for them to make playoffs. But I just wanted to give them some flowers because drafting that well, that late is so hard. Like, people don't realize how hard that is. And if you go back and look at some drafts of years, you go back 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, guys who are drafted in the 5th round, the 6th round, even the 3rd round, the hit rate's not high. even if these guys don't go on to do great things, it's incredible how much production they're getting from guys who they've taken in the mid to late rounds to supplement what we thought was a very top heavy roster.
Yeah, and Luke, I think there's something to that when a 5th round pick can show up in camp and and feel like they have a legitimate shot.
Yeah,
to be to starter, let alone make the team. Yeah. And so if you're Puka Nacua and you're showing up and Kupp is hurt, not playing, right? And your other competition is Van Jefferson and Tutu Atwell, you're thinking, listen, if there's ever a shot, this is it, right?
Yeah.
Which is very different than if you're a 5th round pick and you're sitting behind AJ Brown or you're sitting behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and you're going, I mean, hopefully I can make the team so that someone else will pick me up one day and maybe I can play football. And so I think there's something to, not that this is a good strat. Listen, I'm not recommending any other teams give this a go.
The point is it shouldn't work, but it kind of has, is kind of the point. Right?
Yeah. And I wonder if there's something to it, that these guys really felt like they had a real opportunity. And listen, they beat Indianapolis in overtime, right? They beat the Seattle in week 1. They've lost in the intervening period to San Francisco and Cincinnati. Cincinnati's not a fantastic football team. Let's see what they turn out to be. But early returns, you and I kind of had them left for dead. Thought maybe Sean McVay should have taken the TV job a couple years ago. Was going to be in for a rough rebuild. Yeah, and they've done a heck of a job of putting this thing back together. So more power to you out there in LA. Maybe a couple of your fans will appreciate it if they tune in to watch any of your games.
For sure. But Tim, that's very much the preamble, right? That's the appetizer, the starter course, the amuse-bouche, the hors d'oeuvre to the main course of pick mulligans. As mentioned, both of us had a certain team in the Windy City taking a huge leap forward in 2023. The Chicago Bears. There was some hype preseason. Mm-hmm. We both kind of fell under that spell and said, hey, there's going to be a surprise team in the NFC, and it's going to be Chicago. They're 0-4. They just blew a 17-point lead to the Broncos, who in the week prior had lost by 50 points. I laughed on last week's pod about how they opened as underdogs to the Broncos. And it turns out that Vegas was right because they lost the game.
Still can't believe they lost that game.
It's been a pretty painful start to life in 2023 for the Bears faithful. What have you kind of made of Chicago? Obviously, listen, it goes without saying, we're both saying, sorry, everyone, we were completely wrong, all predictions wrong, or your money back on the half-yard line. But Chicago, not the team that we maybe hoped they would become.
Yeah, look, here's my view on Chicago. I love Justin Fields as a talent. We watched games last year where Justin Fields was doing amazing things. And I don't normally fall for young quarterbacks. I joke. I guess that Mahomes guy's pretty good after all. Like it takes a long time for me to latch on. A rookie quarterback comes out and it's very good. Yeah, well, let's see him do it next year. Right now, people got a year of tape on him. He comes out and he's pretty good. Then I'm like, yeah. Watch for that junior year slump, right? Carson Wentz was going to revolutionize the world. Deshaun Watson was going to revolutionize the world. There's
many a course of these guys. Many a course retailer.
Yeah, we're all right. We've got the next Tom Brady. No, you don't. Relax. Brock Purdy. All right, chill. Kenny Pickett. Everybody's like, oh, Pickett figured it out this summer. I'm like, he hasn't played anybody yet. Let's just pump them brakes.
Yeah, let's see.
And I, for whatever reason, I fell in love with Fields as a talent. I thought he was mesmerizing to watch on the field. He can throw, he can run, throw while he's running. He is one of the most athletic guys on the field. He's dynamic. He has a feel for when to go. All of the things you look for in a dual threat quarterback, I felt like Justin Fields had them. And I felt like they couldn't build a team around him or hadn't built a team around him. They trade the first overall pick, which you and I were incredibly fond of that move. We thought that was the right thing to do.
Still think it was the right thing to do.
You have to use it on a quarterback if you keep it. People were talking about maybe they trade Fields, and you and I are like, no, you got to trade the pick, keep Fields, invest in Fields, build around him. You've got a quarterback who can do what you need him to do. Here is my updated hot take. I think Fields may be the problem. And what I mean by that is he has now got enough football under his belt where the team around him is terrible, he doesn't seem to trust the team. He's double clutching the passes. He's a little bit careful. He's quick to run. It almost looks like he feels like he has to do it all on his own. I don't think he appreciates that the team around him is getting better. And, he's certainly been programmed to believe that, right? You can only run away for your life for so long before it starts impacting the way you play the game. And I really worry about that for this team. You talked about they've got right now the number 1 and the number 2 pick in next year's draft. Unlikely to shake out that way forever, but it would be funny if it did. The challenge with that is, will any of the current executives or coaches for the team be around to make those picks? Can you survive a season where, you went 0 for your last, was it 10 games last season? You're 0 for your first 4 games this season. Yeah. And I gave him a pass for being 0 for the last 10. None of us were giving the Titans a pass for being 0 for their last 7. For whatever reason, felt like the Bears were different. So I'm sad about this one. Obviously I don't really care about the Bears as an organization or their success. I'm not a fan, but I was a fan of Justin Fields, and I still am a fan of Justin Fields. The talent, I think the way he's using those talents this year are not setting that team up for success. The team is still not spectacular, but it's better than it was last year, and the production isn't. They did come alive a little bit against the Broncos. The Broncos are terrible. Worth noting, if Fields doesn't fumble away the ball in the fourth quarter with a lead, they probably win that game, but he did. You got to know in that situation, ball security is number 1, and he's not a rookie anymore. Like, he needs to know that. He gave that game away to the Broncos, a team that if you're going to beat one, it's got to be them. And be fair to the Broncos, if they're going to beat one, it's got to be Chicago, and they came out with enough production to get it done. But I have completely flip-flopped from they're going to be good because Fields is going to make them good to I think they could be better if maybe they had a different quarterback. Now, hopefully Fields can get it figured out, but the first 4 weeks of the season have not been good for Justin Fields.
Yeah, here's what I'll say on Fields. I want to make a slightly different point around the Bears, but I'll piggyback on what you just said. Excuse me. If you watch the All-22 on Justin Fields from this season so far, I'll say from weeks 1 to 3, I'll start with, right? Weeks 1 to 3. There's two things jump off the tape at you. Number 1, this offensive scheme is horrific. Horrific. You got guys running the wrong routes. You got guys running the same route to the same place by design. It looks like in some cases. There's one where 2 guys run a corner and they're basically standing 2 yards apart from each other, 25 yards down the field. You're like, that can't be right. Like, there's no NFL play that is designed that way. They're not getting him on the run. They're not getting him to get vertical down the field with his passing or with his legs, which is such a strength of his game. The team around him looks slow. Guys are missing blocks. The offensive line was horrible. Guys aren't separating on the outside. So I would just say that's one thing that jumps off the tape when you watch the first 3 games. The second thing is more to what you're saying. Either because of that or not, it's causing Justin Fields' confidence to sag. He's not decisive. He's not throwing with anticipation. He's not throwing on time. He's looking jumpy. The eyes go down. This happens a lot with young quarterbacks. I mean, the big example I always think of is David Carr, right? We're going way back now when he was with the Texans coming out of Fresno State.
David Carr. Yeah, right.
This is going to be, a great player. He just got the living shit beat out of him for so long. It just killed his ability to move. We joked before the podcast, but the Sam Darnold, I'm seeing ghosts thing, that's a real thing. Like, that's a real thing. Good luck trying to teach a guy not to expect to get hit when he's been getting hit all the time, or expecting his guy to get open when the guy never gets open. So Justin Fields certainly has played a part in it, not giving him a pass. But I will say the offensive scheme and the play design and the overall kind of profile of the players around him looked awful when you watch that first 3 weeks tape. You watch this tape, he's 28 of 35 for 335 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, agree, ball security at the end, not good. We're not giving him a complete pass, but that's not a stat line a lot of guys put up, right? Forget
no,
Justin
it's
Fields.
not.
That's not a stat. So you watch the tape and it's like, what the hell am I watching? Like, you're watching a completely different team, completely different player. So whether they made some
keep in mind who they were playing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but the fact that he was able to do that it's not like he said, yeah, well, he threw 10 completions for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, and they were all kind of fluky lobs or whatever. Like that was a legitimate,
not a Russell Wilson game. I got you.
Yeah, it was a legitimate QB1 performance from the guy. So I want to give him the credit. Played well. They scored 20. Well, Tim, let me make my second point.
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
They scored. The point I really want to make is they scored 28 points at home and they lost.
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen. The Bears have allowed 25 points in 14 consecutive games. 14. They've allowed 25 points. The defense was bad last year. Eberflus is meant to be a defensive head coach. The defense is still bad this year. They traded away guys to get Eberflus's scheme guys. That has not worked out. Look at Roquan Smith gone off to the Ravens, played like an all-pro. You know, they're trying to basically put guys into the scheme, and the scheme is allowing 25 points week in, week out. You can give Justin Fields as much hate or props as you want. Very few teams win games allowing 25 points. Now, I know the offense has contributed to that with fumble 6, pick 6, and that kind of thing, but still, the defense got to pull its weight. You mentioned about if they end up having the top 2 picks, the regime's not going to be there. The current regime, as it stands, is 3-18. So everybody is getting fired. Now, Ryan Poles, who's the GM, may survive because you trade all those picks away. You've got the ammunition next year. That was the game plan, really, when you got number 1. But Eberflus, his seat is more of a stove at this point, I would suggest. So I just wanted to mention that although Justin Fields and his poor play and the offense's poor play has played a part, the defense is horrendous. And, you know, that's playing a huge role in the fact that his team just keeps on losing games. And much like you, I fell under the spell and I maybe looked past the defense, maybe thought they'd improve with some of the free agent, signings they made. Not so.
Even after this week's performance, Luke, his air yards per attempt, so the ball in the air, whether they caught it or not, how long was the ball in the air? 7.5 yards this year, down from 9.1 and 9.8 the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So every year got worse. Air yards on per catch, 7.5 his rookie year, 6.7 last year, 5.7 this year.
Yeah.
Per attempt, 4.4, 4.0, 3.7. We are moving the wrong direction.
Wrong way.
In a way that I would never have speculated with this player.
No, and I agree. And, maybe I'm just clinging on to the prediction, and I really like Justin Fields coming out of Ohio State as a prospect, so maybe I'm clinging on to that evaluation too. But let's see if week 4 is more like if weeks 5 through 18 are more like week 4, then we got a quarterback on our hands. If they're like 1 through 3, we're picking a new one. So to be determined. But Tim,
that's right.
We've crapped on ourselves. We've crapped on the Bears.
Yes.
We are going to end on a positive note. This week,
yes,
from the very same game, Tim, we have the Jonas Gray Memorial Player
of the Week.
Handing out, as always, the Jonas Gray commemorative teaspoon to one lucky NFL player who comes out of the clear blue sky to put together a surprising and impressive performance. As we say every time, full disclaimer, Jonas Gray went away, never came back, flash in the pan. We want every Jonas Gray player to not suffer the same fate and go on to great things. Want to make that clear. This week, Tim, from that game, how about Jaleel McLaughlin, running back?
Of course.
Denver Broncos. Tim, I will say we've done plenty of Jonas Gray Memorial Players of the Week. One of my favorite things to do. I've done plenty of research. I looked into plenty of guys. This might be my favorite story of any Jonas Gray player we've ever had on the podcast. Yeah.
We've had some good ones, Luke.
We've had some good ones. The ones this year, no offense to any of you guys. When I was like, oh, this guy seems like a Jonas Gray Player of the Week. He wasn't drafted. That's usually the first thing, right? The more I looked in, the more I just thought, wow, this is a hell of a story. And I want to give him his props. He's a rookie, Tim. He's 5'7". He's 187 pounds, and he's a running back. Not many of those guys.
No.
He came into this game. Javonte Williams got hurt, and he didn't get too many touches, just the 10 touches for Jaleel. However, he turned those 10 touches into 104 all-purpose yards and a touchdown in a game that the Broncos won by 3. So had a huge impact. It was their first touchdown of the day, got them on the board. They went on to win the game. He obviously played a big part in that, explosive, ripping off big plays and giving them some spark in the absence of their star RB1. Tim, he's from Marshville, North Carolina. Not sure if you're familiar with it. I am not.
Marshville,
North Carolina. Nope. Yeah.
No, sir.
Kentucky is not too far. So I never know with you. Sometimes you know these places.
I mean, I'm in North Carolina a lot these days, Luke.
That's true. But yeah, I mean, it's a guy who you want to talk about overcoming adversity. A lot of obviously guys that do that in the NFL. At one point when he was growing up, he was living in a car with his mum and his siblings, and the car was parked in a McDonald's parking lot. So he was homeless for a time. You know, pretty tough stuff that I think a lot of guys would not maybe do so well from. But very tough to grow up in that position. Eventually got a little bit more settled and situated, and he went on to become a star athlete at Forest Hills High in Marshville. He was second place in the state 400 meters. His team won the 100 and 200 4x1, 4x2 relay, so super fast athlete. Tim, playing football, he ran for 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns in his final year.
Yikes.
It's quite good, as far as I'm aware. He only had 167 attempts, so he's averaging about 8 yards a carry.
What?
Yeah. So how many Division I offers do you think Jaleel McLaughlin had after such a stellar performance?
It sounds like maybe 0.
He had 0. The only D1 teams that wanted to sign him wanted him to play DB because he was small. So no one wanted to let him play running back except him. He got an offer from a little place called Notre Dame. Not that one. There's a different Notre Dame, which I didn't know existed, called Notre Dame College, which is in Euclid, Ohio.
Not to be confused with university, which is
to be confused with the university. They're slightly more prestigious. No offense to Notre Dame College, but Notre Dame. When he was with the Notre Dame Falcons, Tim, remember this is a guy who no one wanted. Right? No, a lot of athletes have this bullshit about no one wanted me. Blah blah blah. It's almost always made up. Not so. So 0 D1 offers to play running back. He goes to a D2 school. In his first game, he ran for 302 yards, which was a school record as a freshman. Doing pretty well. So, and then a few weeks later, he ran for 340 yards to break his own record. And he only played 3 quarters in that game. So, some statistics Paul put up. Here are his college. I'll just go kind of year by year and his college career.
Okay.
As a freshman, he had 2,421 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns. In his sophomore year, he had 2,316 rushing yards and 33 touchdowns. He was the runner-up for the Harlan Hill Trophy, which we mentioned on a previous pod, which is the D2 version of the Heisman. So these are some pretty gaudy statistics. He then transferred to Youngstown State, which I think some people may have heard of. It's also in Ohio, but he went there. In his junior season, it was the COVID year, so a little bit choppy. Only 691 yards, but it was only in 7 games. And then his senior year, he ran for 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. So pretty impressive. But most impressively of all, Tim, he is the all-time leading rusher in college football history. It's Jaleel McLaughlin. It's not Barry Sanders. It's not Ricky Williams. It's not Earl Campbell. It's Jaleel McLaughlin. And in his final game, he needed 219 yards to break that record. He ran for 227. So his last collegiate game, he needed 219 yards to be the all-time leading rusher in the NCAA, and he eclipsed that. So he's the all-time leading rusher.
Went and got
trivia question for you. So, Tim, how do you think he got on at the Combine? I mean, he's the all-time leading rusher.
He went to the Combine.
He was not invited to the Combine. He's the all-time leading rusher in the history of college football. He wasn't invited to the Combine. He ran a 4.4 at his pro day.
Meritocracy, my ass.
Yeah. He had 17 reps. 17 reps, by the way, on the bench, 225. He doesn't weigh 225. He weighs 187 pounds. That's pretty good.
Yep.
How many times did you do taken
in your life?
I mean, if I've warmed up, 0. So, and if in my life, 0. How many running backs do you think went in 2023, Tim, in the draft?
Oh, I did so well on this the other day, and I'm going to be
embarrassed.
I would guess less running backs, so maybe 11.
18. 18 running backs were taken.
That's not good at all.
Do you know Jaleel McLaughlin was not one of those?
Not among them.
But as mentioned, he was signed as an undrafted free agent by the Broncos, made the roster. He had 21 carries for 113 yards and 3 touchdowns in the preseason. So good for him, making the roster. Played some spot duty early on, scored a touchdown in week 2. But really the coming out party this week. I think my favorite end-to-end Jonas Gray player of the week, just to recap, was a dominant high school running back, got no D1 offers, ran for 300 yards in his first college game, which was the school record. Then retired from college football, if you want to call it that, as the all-time leading rusher in NCAA history. Then didn't get invited to the combine. Then didn't get drafted. Then made the team, and is now the proud owner of the Jonas Gray Memorial Teaspoon for week 4 in 2023. Tim, anything you want to say about that that treatise that I've offered on Jaleel McLaughlin?
So all I can say is I always wonder how players like this don't get a shot at some place, right? I understand Alabama has no need to go get this guy from Youngstown State. They got plenty of quality players. This is the kind of guy, though, that like Deion Sanders is going to sign at Colorado, and we're all going to go, oh, Jiminy Christmas. Because I understand he's undersized. And look, in the NFL, let's be really honest. This guy is going to be good for, however many touches he gets until someone breaks him in half. And then everyone will go, yeah, he can't really play running back in the league at 5'7", 110 pounds or whatever he is. And so I get that. But in college, there's a bunch of D1 schools out there who don't have competent running games. And this guy, listen, I can't imagine Youngstown State's got the best offensive line in the history of college football, and he ran for more yards than anybody. So, at some point you kind of go, no, I don't know why. I don't know how. I can't see it with my eyes, but I can tell you that as I flip through the record book, seems to be a guy we want on our team. That. So more power to him, I hope. No, that's wild.
I couldn't believe that, this isn't a guy who stacks up some D2 stats. You go, it's fine. There's plenty of good running backs out there. This is a guy who set the NCAA record for the most rushing yards, and he didn't get invited to the combine or get drafted. Incredible story, incredible achievement, crowned, of course, with the Jonas Gray Memorial Teaspoon, and hopefully many more achievements to come.
So, Luke, as we wrap up this podcast, we didn't do something today that we do almost every week. And so I wanted to do it really quickly, if you don't mind.
Please.
And that is read a drive chart. And I'm not going to tell you which game it was.
Yeah. Okay.
I want you to guess. I'm going to give you one team's drive chart, and then I'm going to give you some summary statistics from the game. Okay? This is how their day went. Punt, touchdown, punt, touchdown, end of half, downs, missed field goal, punt, field goal, downs. Okay? That's not a great day. That's a lot of punting. Got a couple of touchdowns in there. More power to you. Missed a field goal, made a couple.
Missed a kick.
All right. This team was out time of possession by 12 minutes. This team converted only 3 of 12 third downs. This team went 0 of 2 on their attempts to convert fourth downs. This same team was outplayed, had fewer plays by 23. Their quarterback threw for literally half as many yards as the opponent's quarterback. They committed more penalties for more penalty yards. And they won their game by 21 points.
Yeah, I know who it is. It's the Seattle Seahawks from Monday Night Football.
So the statistics in this game, listen, the Giants were terrible. The Giants were absolutely atrociously terrible. I was, my boss's boss is a big Seahawks fan, and he knows I have a podcast. And so we were chatting about this today. He's talking about the Seahawks. And I said, man, they look better than I think a lot of people thought they would. Love Geno Smith. Big fan of Geno on the podcast. Geno Montana doing great out there in Seattle. But in this one, Geno was 13 of 20 for $110. They didn't have a running back over 100 yards. They gained a grand total of 280 yards on offense. They were 25% on third down, 0% on fourth down. The difference in this game, of course, was the defense, because they had 11 sacks, the 3 forced turnovers, a defensive touchdown. And when you're doing those things, you don't need to hold the ball. But if you just look at the stats in this one, you go, how did the Giants lose this game by 3 touchdowns? And the answer, of course, is turnovers and poor special teams. But, I was shocked at some of the stats. So I just wanted to throw that one in there as a nugget. Quick hit for our fans. We love a drive chart here on the half-yard line. That was one of the more wild drive chart stat combos. So thank you for following us here on the half-yard line. Appreciate every single one of you. Check us out on your favorite podcast app. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on the social media applications at halfyardlinepod, halfyardlinepod@gmail.com for the emails. Would love to interact with you guys in that way. But that is going to do it for us here on the Half Yard Line. So until next time, be good.
Adios.